Um, Over the last year, Innovation Unit worked as the learning partner, the innovation learning partner for the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, and particularly the Public Service Reform Team, to understand what was happening on the front lines. In practice, what that meant was that between May and September of 2020, we spoke with over 100 people across 12 workshops from across public, private and voluntary sector organisations, and of course residents themselves. We looked in depth at early help in children's services, at homelessness and community hubs, and we did a deep dive into the community response in Oldham. So that's where all of this learning comes from. A very quick story to illustrate some of what we learned. So one of the places that we had conversations with was Stockport, who have been operating a team around the school model now for the past 5 years. And essentially, that's a multi-agency team sitting in a school where families and children are known best. And to begin with, it was just a team of social workers, nurses, early help practitioners, teachers and families themselves to help prevent family breakdown and reduce referrals into children's social care. What happened in COVID was that the model was really turbocharged. So instead of working with a particular cohort of families and young people, suddenly the question was simply, which families need help and how can we help? Secondly, the team expanded to include police, mental health, housing, voluntary sector organisations, so that the help that those families needed, including the adults in those families, got referrals instantly and support when they needed it. And finally, that team met daily instead of weekly to make sure that they were addressing issues as they arose. So that's just one story, and I'm sure you all have many, many similar. And our job then was to pull together that work into a series of themes. And I will just very quickly share a slide there to help me tell that story. Don't worry, I am not going to talk about all of this, there's lots here. We pulled it together into 4 buckets, if you like: practice and citizen experience, workforce and culture, leadership and governance, and the system conditions within which people were working that enabled them to work in new ways. 1 or 2 very brief headlines. In practice and citizen experience, the thing that really seemed to summarise it was far less assessment and far more help. That was really the thing. People-focused support when people needed it, where they needed it, when they needed it. And the digital anytime, anywhere access meant that more people were getting access to more help when they needed it. The second big thing in workforce and culture was really about the development of blended community teams. So joint teams of VCSE workers, public sector professionals, local businesses, local residents coming together to solve problems and to each take on the bits of it that they could do best. Leadership and governance, a very obvious point about real unity of purpose, people coming together to help protect their friends, families and neighbours from the worst of the risks from COVID. And that purpose too, mobilising new leaders from amongst the community to get on and get stuff done. Finally, in system conditions, of course, lots of the things that we usually have to help manage resource and quality and risk just disappeared. Commissioning, regulation, inspection. And in its place grew up a different kind of mutual accountability around the outcomes that local people were seeking to address that helped to manage risk sensibly and manage resource sensibly against the things that they were all trying to achieve together. And I should say here a little side note that intelligent data sharing happened too, where the risk of sharing data in the wrong ways was balanced up with the risk of not doing it to people's lives. So those are some of the things that we heard, and I'm sure they resonate strongly with lots of things that everybody here has experienced. And the question really to our panelists today, to Andy and Chris, is partly the extent to which these ideas and this learning resonates. But in truth, it's probably the least interesting bit of the conversation. What conversations about public service reform haven't included a focus on personalised services or integrated local teams over the past 20 years or so? The real question is what's special in this moment that is going to help us to embed some of these ways of working? And what are the things that you are already doing and that you're planning to do in order to mainstream the best of this innovation for the future? So that's the question for each, or those are the questions for each of our panelists. Andy and Chris, I'll turn to Andy first, and each of you have got 5 minutes and then the opportunity to ask questions of each other too. So Andy, over to you.